Hi folks, this is all the fruit, and along this little country road here in Heidelberg, Germany, there are lots of hazelnut shrubs. Most hazelnut species are shrubs, except for the tree hazel. And here we have Corylus avellana. You could call it the European hazel. It's named after the town of Avella or Abella in southern Italy, a place which was famous for hazelnut production since antiquity. Well, nowadays most hazelnuts don't even come from Europe. About half of the worldwide production that appears on the market comes from Turkey, from little mom and pop farms, and nowadays even gramps and granny farms in the mountains of northern Turkey. And about half of the worldwide production is being bought by the biggest food company, Nestle. But why is this nut, which nowadays is being produced mostly in Turkey, the most European nut? By the way, in Turkey they mostly grow Corylus maxima, a species of Anatolia and southeastern Europe. Although both species are quite closely related and sometimes you cannot distinguish between both. So in Turkey the production is basically a mix of both species. So why is this the most European nut? Well, it occurs throughout most of Europe, like from the south, Spain, Italy, Greece, to the north, Scandinavia, Russia. It's pretty common everywhere. In more Nordic, colder countries, even the etymology kind of supports this. Like for example, in Russia, this is called leskoi orech, or forest nut, while the walnut, pretty common nut in southern and central Europe, in Russia it's called grechki orech, or Greek nut, because it comes from the warm Greek countries. And also same thing in Germany, walnut means Italian nut, in English Persian walnut. It's actually the most correct thing. Yep, it actually comes from Persia and not from Italy. But let's go back to the hazelnut. Yeah, you can find it in most European countries, maybe with the exception of Iceland, I'm not sure, but Iceland is pretty icy anyway, despite being green. And yeah, it was also, at least in Central Europe, the first species that managed to create forests after the Ice Age. A couple thousand years after the Ice Age, pretty suddenly, Central Europe was covered with hazelnut forests. And I still think that our ancestors brought them here because, well, how does a hazelnut spread? Doesn't fall very far from the shrub, and then birds and squirrels can carry it a couple dozen or maybe even a couple 100 meters, but to spread thousands of kilometers, basically you need some migratory humans who would collect this stuff in autumn, then preserve it throughout the winter, and then use it as a sort of trail food while hiking from the warm Mediterranean areas to the colder central and northeast European countryside in spring. And then from time to time stopping for a rest, breaking a couple hazelnuts, losing a few. I think that's how the first European forest got created, by man. So yeah, man has been here much longer than the forest. Like the first forests after the Ice Age were here around 6,000 years ago, but humans have been in the Heidelberg area for almost 500,000 of years. So yeah, that's why it's the most European hazelnut for me. And also in big parts of Europe, hazelnut dominated forests were quite typical until a couple decades ago. In Germany you have the so-called Niederwald and Mittelwald. The Niederwald is basically a forest where you cut down all the trees about each 10 to 15 years, basically for stuff like firewood and small wooden tools. And the Mittelwald is basically the same, but you have a couple of big trees among the little ones. And yeah, those Niederwald and Mittelwald, they were quite dominated by hazelnuts, but after World War II most of those forests, sometimes even before World War II, were turned into timber producing forests. By the way, those were not forests, those were orchards. And yeah, the hazelnuts growing here, a lot of them are wild from local stock, but a lot of them must also have been planted. I could tell you in most cases which plants are planted and which are of native stock. And for that, let's go and look at the hazelnuts I collected. By the way, the hazelnut is a true nut, while all those things like walnuts and coconuts, they are not really nuts. But the hazelnut, in the botanical sense, is a true nut. So look at those hazelnuts here. Some pretty big ones. They would be even much bigger, but we had 3 years of drought stress, and so they're considerably smaller. Some other big variety, a lot of drought stress, that's why, well, there are some pointy varieties, but I think this year they are more pointy. In other years they would be a little bit more inflated. And here the different hazelnuts of local stock. You can see the difference of coloring and shape and size, but basically those are more or less the wild local hazelnuts. Wait, I didn't add any of those. Those could be some bigger local native stock, or could be also some variety. There are also some ornamental varieties which don't have particularly large nuts, but rather interesting coloring. Down there, okay, maybe I should have included it in the video, is one with pink calyxes. Basically the plant looks like the wild hazelnut, just the calyx is pink. There are other plants where the all the leaves and all the other parts which are normally green are purple. But yeah, I'm sure we have some of those purple hazelnuts around here, but right now I couldn't see any. So let's compare the tastes. Here I have one of the, well, half of the pointy nuts. Here is the other half. So this is one from this plant, which I'm pretty sure, well, I'm sure it's a cultivar. Nice. Now one of the giant ones, which are not that giant this year. They're even, well, they're bigger varieties. Some are as big as small walnuts. Even this variety would be a couple millimeters bigger. More fresh, more juicy. I guess because this nut, the other nut, is a little bit older. One of the small ones, yeah. There is a variety of tastes in the hazelnut, but here I cannot notice it. Like, some would be shriveled up and they would taste very different from the ones which are thick and plump like those. Also, of course, the age, like this here still looks very juicy. It completely fills the shell. An older one, like the one sold in the supermarkets, will already be a little bit shriveled up, but not much, not filling the shell completely. So yeah, the age of the nut, if it's fresh off the shrub or stored for a longer time, is a big difference. The fact, like this one is a little bit shriveled up, would also taste different from a nice and plump one from a well nourished tree. Also, this has some of those, I don't even know the name of this disease which affects the seeds. It came up in the last couple years. Before that we didn't have it. Now this nut will taste bitter. I don't even want to eat it. Probably it's even toxic in some way. But basically with those nuts I don't taste so many differences. The taste range of Corylus avellana is much bigger than what I just tasted here. And then there are other hazelnut species which taste completely different. For example, Corylus colurna nuts taste completely different. Corylus maxima basically tastes like Corylus avellana, but since both species can almost not be distinguished, it's not a big surprise. But Corylus colurna tastes different. But actually wanted to show you the taste difference in Corylus avellana, but I must admit those here taste more or less the same. So folks, here we had different types of nuts from Corylus avellana, the most European of all nuts. Stay tuned for a lot more fruit videos. from the beautiful country of Germany. And don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe.